All right. In this section, we're going to be talking about poultices, powders, and ointments. And in this, I'm going to cover the definition of a poultice, poultice preparations, general instructions concerning poultices, several old-time poultices that you've never heard about, and you may never hear about again outside of this instruction. The definition of powdering, powdering preparation, general powdering information, powdering methods, ointments, the definitions and preparations from the, and then we're going to conclude with the from the shepherd's purse plant list. Okay, definition of a poultice. Okay, so the poultices are made from ground or granulated herbs, and the area to be covered by a poultice needs to be washed with hydrogen peroxide. So you generally want that on a clean area of the body. Okay. And then you do not rewarm poultices once they are used. It's considered one-time use, and then you make a fresh poultice and you continue that way. The main objective of applying poultices is to have the warmth and moisture retained as long as possible. And that's naturally, again, it's not rewarming, it's not putting into a microwave or something else. When using herbs in powdered form, you mix it with hot water, cornmeal, or some other meal to make a thick paste. If green leaves are used, you mash, beat, or otherwise contuse the plant. You steep the plant in hot water for a couple of minutes and then apply it to the affected area. You apply it hot, however, but not so hot as to burn the skin surface. So it's heated to the point of tolerance. And then in some cases, some plant juices may stain clothes or may need to be covered with a piece of plastic. So we're not talking about the castor oil pack so much or poultice castor oil applications, but when you're using fresh plant juice and those types of things, you're careful of the clothing and the environment that you have. Now, poultice preparations. So for one would be to pour a cup of the bruised herb into 2 cups of boiling water, and then stirring it constantly to uniform texture, pouring the hot paste on a prepared flannel cloth. And I emphasize by saying we're speaking of typically a virgin cotton or wool flannel, not anything that is bleached or dyed. You spread it evenly, then fold to form an elongated bag and apply on the surface areas hot is comfortably withstood and cover with it could be a hot water bottle or heating pad as long as possible. Okay. And then you can have a second poultice prepared as soon as the first one cools down. And some old time poultice recipes. Now, bread poultice. You heat the bread crumbs with fresh whole milk, stir to a thickness desired, add a small amount of, and now this case says lard. I'll give you the substitutions in a little bit. For those people who don't use pork products, don't want to use lard, these are the traditional remedies. And that bread poultice is for infections. Then you have a raspberry leaf poultice, which is a rubefacient. And you make a strong infusion with the leaves. Add this with crackers and powdered slippery elm bark, and put a touch of ginger and stir to a poultice texture. A carrot poultice you can use for inflammation and suppurations. So you shred 4 ounces of carrots, add an ounce of cornmeal, add enough boiling water to make a poultice texture. Onions can replace carrots. So you got a carrot or onions for inflammation or the suppurations. Cayenne pepper poultice, used as a counter irritant. Now, it seems kind of counterintuitive that you would use a cayenne pepper that people would normally consider to be hotter, maybe be irritating or something like that. But this is a counter irritant. You add equal parts of cayenne pepper and slippery elm. Infuse enough warm water to form a poultice. And then you have the mustard and let's see. Then you have mustard poultices. The use is rubefacient. Rubefacient brings circulation to the surface of the skin. You mix 2 to 3 fluid ounces of boiling water with 2.5 ounces of ground mustard. Separately mix 6 to 8 ounces of boiling water with 2.5 ounces of ground linseed and mix a separate mixture into a poultice. Then you have, you well, I don't know. I would say you may have heard of a mustard pack or mustard poultice, but again, it's not as commonly used. This is an old-time remedy. Linseed or flaxseed poultice. This is an emollient and a drawing, a softening and a drawing poultice. Make a strong infusion with the leaves, add this to crackers and powdered slippery elm bark. Put a touch of ginger and stir to the poultice texture, and then a general healing poultice. It's a stimulant and an astringent, combining one half part of bayberry root bark with 6 parts of ginger powder and 1 part each of cayenne and cloves. Mix with hot water to poultice texture and add a small amount of lard or something else that would be an emollient, for softening. Cayenne pepper poultice. Actually, that was okay. That's duplicated there. Okay. Now, part 3, spice poultice. It's an aromatic, okay, and anodyne, which is pain relieving. This poultice is prepared from ordinary spices like mustard, clove, cinnamon, ginger, and spice in equal parts, and they add a small amount of vinegar. They say it doesn't matter what type of vinegar, so apple cider vinegar, white distilled vinegar, or whatever, doesn't matter. And these are common herbs that would typically be found, or common spices that would typically be found in many kitchens. And then there's a potato poultice for use for pink eye and inflammation, where you shred the raw potato into granules, close the eye, and apply apply for healing. Hold it in place with a gauze cloth and secure with a cloth retainer. So what is the purpose of a poultice? Relieving pain, getting nutrients or some healing to an area, or in some cases, it is drawing, to draw out impurities. So it can bring something in, it can take some inflammation out. Those are the functions of poultices, okay? And those are some very powerful ones. I know went over those quickly. May look back at those as well, refer back to those. So we get into powder preparation, definition, and methods. What is powdering? Powdering is reducing plants in size to meet the requirement for inclusion into capsules, ointments, infusions, etc. That's called powdering. So we take a plant, we dry the plant, we dry the herb, we dry the leaves, we dry whatever part of the plant, and then we break it down. Now, why do we break it down? In the capsules. Easier to ingest, easier to apply. Bitter herbs, some that just, somebody would not normally take by mouth. You put that in the capsules for uniformity of delivery as well. So there are times that, if depending on the product, you may not know how much you're getting. If it called for a certain number of capsules, or you'll notice in some of the instructions, it'll say you use a certain grain capsule. Okay, so you're getting you're delivering a uniform amount of the herb in capsule form, and it may be a smaller capsule for a younger person, or a person of a certain weight, and a larger capsule and a larger dosage for people of a certain weight. So there are rules that apply to dosages that we'll address as well in another time or another section. Now, or ointments. So you could powder to get it into an ointment. So if you have the leaves in whole, or the flower, or the root or something in whole, it wouldn't mix well with the beeswax or with paraffin to go into an ointment. So you break it down, so it becomes more, let's say, bioavailable. So it becomes more usable. Or in a tea, you break it down so that the medicine can be infused, can be absorbed, can be extracted. That's the purpose of powdering. Ointments, definition and preparations. Select only good quality plant materials. They should be free from dirt, dust, and other adulterant. Brown or diseased plants should not be used. Powdering should be done just prior to the user's actual need. So you're not powdering it well in advance. The more you break it down, the more you decrease, let's say, the shelf life of it, or the usability of it, especially if it is exposed to heat, to moisture, or something else. The active principles dissipate with the various plants. The plant material should be extremely dry before the powdering process begins. Powdering is best accomplished with it reduced environmental something over there. But then how do we know that a plant is dry? How do we know that the herb is dry? It is no longer cool to the touch. No longer cool to the touch. Weight for weight. Powdered plant is more potent than an herbaceous green plant. So the proportions that you would use. So green plant has a high water content. So you're going to reduce it. It's by about half. So for example, if you had a green plant, and a fresh plant that you were using, and you needed to get use a certain amount of it, when you dry it, it's concentrated. So you're eliminating the water, and you just got the plant in its active constituents, or the medicine that's in there as well. Okay. So it becomes more concentrated as it is dried. The problem with storing powdered botanicals is they must be stored so moisture and insects do not cause them harm. Like other foods, store in a cool, dry place. Store you have to be careful with the storage. Fine powdered plants can be flammable and should be kept away from open fire or gas burners. Be careful with this. Okay. There are a number of things that are combustible. Sometimes you can almost have flour, and it can be combustible if it was let into the air, right? So when trying to reduce gummy or resinous plants to a powder, it may be necessary to add a little ether or high-proof alcohol to the mix. And then practice will greatly enhance your skills in using powdering plants, if that's what you want to do. And so they emphasize here, since your work is for your own private use, not for sale or marketing, you're practicing and doing this, and not for commercial purposes. That's what that last part is saying there. And then Powdering methods and techniques. Pre-reduction preparation of plants. Some plants should be reduced in size while they're still green and freshly collected. Slicing and cutting to expose more surface area for drying can also serve to reduce the size of plant from milling and grinding. Mills and plant grinders are available, and they're designed to reduce plant granules into fine powders. Some are hand powdered while others are electrically powdered. So for example, as you see, and I think I pointed out the mortar and pestle, that's one of the earliest ways or methods of breaking plants down into powders, into usable substances. So there's in this case, they're talking about, in many cases, pulverizing with a hammer or a mallet can reduce the dried plant to sizes where other powdering can be employed. Dried roots, coarse bark, and thick stems can be comminuted. It's broken down by this technique. And that mortar and pestle, there were a lot of things that were done. They churned milk and they did all kinds of things back in the day. Today, they use this more modern method, or some people might use coffee grinders or some other type of grinders or some other type of methods in order to break things down to smaller size. After the plant has been reduced to a fairly small granular mass or more or less semi-coarse powder, a mortar and pestle can be used to further, the particles size. A spatula can be used to reduce particle size while incorporating medicaments or medicines into ointments and salves. That's called the fine reduction. So you got reduction, where you're breaking it down from larger by slicing, cutting, etc., and breaking it down more and more and more depending on how fine you want the powder to be. And again, because the more you break it down, the more it's exposed, the more it's reduced, the more sensitive it is to light, to moisture, to environmental conditions as well. All right. Ointments, definition and preparations. Ointments are semi-solid preparations for external applications. They are derived from animal or vegetable oils and also from petroleum bases with other supplemental substances to make them more usable. Modern bases are available, which make excellent ointment preparations. Various non-commercial ointment substances can be obtained on your own without much difficulty. Now, semi-solid preparations for external applications is kind of the operative phrase here. Semi-solid preparations from animal or vegetable oils. So now I can say my preference in many of the formulas, they may avoid using the animal oils and prefer to use vegetable oils. They may avoid using things with petroleum base in preference for a more natural substance of vegetable oil, etc. Okay, so in some of these formulas and some things you'll see, you will see both. Now, so some ointment bases can include lanolin, which is from wool fat, goose grease, lard, and some of these things, because they were just readily available. If people raised geese and ducks and pigs and those types of things, it was in sheep, easy to get these things and it was efficient, inexpensive to use these things. Now, and then you have the use of olive oil or sesame seed oil or cottonseed oil, hydrogenated vegetable oil. More sophisticated process. You don't just get some sesame seeds and squeeze it and get oil. Okay, it's a process that you get cold pressed olive oil or hydrogenated vegetable oil or peanut oil. Dr. George Washington Carver, famous for using peanut oil or safflower oil. Mineral oil has also been used. Petroleum jelly or petroleum products and then even glycerin. Now, to give the above oils firmness, these semi-solid preparations, beeswax or paraffin are supplemental additives. The hardness depends on the climate. So if you are in a climate where the temperature is typically 100 degrees, you'll notice that a coconut oil will be liquid more so than if it's in a cooler environment. Okay, winter, summer, climate, those types of things. So the amount of beeswax or paraffin, which are probably the two most common substances that are used to give the oil firmness so that it can be used in a semi-solid state. Okay. Hardness, yeah, okay. And then we go to the from the shepherd's purse, the plants list. We don't have to go through all these. This is going to, is here for reference. It lists the herbs that are in the sections that we're covering and their botanical or Latin names. Okay. And that concludes this section. All right. That part is for reference. And that concludes poultices, ointments, and some other preparation methods.